I have not played The Last of Us. In fact, when my own brother begged me to get the first game when it released all the way back in 2013, I bullheadedly refused. It's just another stupid zombie game, boo friggin' who, I said. My brother did the smart thing and ended up playing it anyways. Even after accolades, Game of the Year awards, and absolutely wild critical acclaim, I stood my ground in the face of everyone that recommended the game. For years after, I kept hearing about it and people kept recommending it to me and I kept ignoring it. I dug my shitty take hole so deep that it was getting increasingly hard for me to see the light. I resigned to letting my only interaction with the game be through hearing my brother practice the theme song endlessly on my guitar. And the young fool that I was, I ignored it all the way until 2023. With the series finally coming out and also receiving critical acclaim, my friend insisted I finally give it a chance. And after putting off watching the first episode for more than a month and a half, I finally got into it. All with the express purpose of answering one question. Should you watch The Last of Us if you haven't played the games? Is it good enough to stand on its own as a TV series? Is it worth your time as a non-gamer? Or do you need hours worth of video game background in order to properly enjoy it? Okay, maybe that's more than one question, but they're all questions within the same ballpark of, can this show stand on its own? Without getting into spoilers, The Last of Us follows the gruff, trauma-laden smuggler Joel as he escorts the feisty, energetic teenage Ellie across a post-apocalyptic US, 20 years into a fungal outbreak that has infected people everywhere and turned them into mindless, violent zombies. Ellie is different. Unlike the rest of humanity, she seems to possess some sort of immunity to the cordyceps infection, and the goal is to get her somewhere where that immunity could be made into a cure. Simple enough plot at the surface, and if you're like I was all those years ago when the first game dropped, sick and tired of zombie media, then you might think this premise is boring and overdone. But the thing about The Last of Us is that it doesn't put zombie infection at the forefront of the story. It's not an action-packed spectacle meant to show you some cool-ass post-apocalyptic mofos busting zombie heads and taking down hordes. The Last of Us is instead a very personal, very human story that focuses primarily on the pseudo-father-daughter relationship between our protagonists, Joel and Ellie. It's an exploration of pain in the face of trauma, of love, and of finding purpose in the remnants of an almost hopeless world. It also dives deep into morality and how far one can stretch it in the name of survival. The Last of Us is a drama more than it is anything else. Don't let the weird mushroom-headed zombie pictures fool you. This isn't your typical zombie action romp. In fact, if you're interested in this purely from a zombie-slaying fun perspective, it might not be for you, as the infected in the show quickly become scarce and far between. When they're used well, but they just aren't used all that much in general, and that's because the show's writers made the active decision to focus on the more human aspects, those being the characters and the drama. And the drama in the show is well executed. The characters are deep and very fleshed out, the dialogue, character goals, motivations, and plot events are real and sensical. The performances are top-notch and the story is interesting, the contrasting dynamic between the two leads really carrying that story forward and creating a powerful emotional anchor for us viewers. Is the story vague or unclear or too dependent on concepts from the game? Surprisingly, no. We all know video game adaptations in film and TV haven't always been the best, but as far as story clarity and flow, The Last of Us does a good job. I had very little familiarity with the games, as I only had a brief idea of the game's overarching plots, and yet I had zero trouble keeping up with the show. Everything it explains well, and it repeats frequently enough that you have no trouble remembering. The cordyceps virus is mostly clearly defined. There's not much in the way of scientific jargon and mumbo-jumbo to confuse you. It's explained and presented in a straightforward manner. And so is the general history of the world over the past 20 years of zombie apocalypse. Suffice to say, you most likely never have to pause the show to Google a random word or look up clarification on why this thing does that or who that guy is or whatever. It's all fairly straightforward. So, if you're a fan of dramas filled with morally questionable decisions, The Last of Us may very well be your cup of tea. But keyword here is may. It depends on your flavor of drama. One of the things I feel may turn some people off from this show is its pace. To me, this show is more of a slow burn. I mean, yeah, the stakes are high, what with trying to find a cure for a worldwide zombie apocalypse, but the focus is usually more intimate. Episode by episode, we watch our protagonists Joel and Ellie run into obstacles along their journey and subsequently deal with those obstacles. Sometimes the obstacles feel more like individual stops along the journey and don't completely connect to the events that come before and after. Moreover, there are usually long portions of just slow travel or simple exploration that don't do much but show us the world and the characters through the visuals and the dialogue. It's all linked and it's all part of the journey, and thematically, most of these obstacles and stops are very relevant to the conclusion of the season and to the character arcs of both characters, but sometimes these stops can feel a bit detached. This detachedness is particularly highlighted in the show's many flashback sequences, some of which, while incredibly enjoyable on their own, don't tightly knit into the main flow of the story. At least not unless you take the big picture into consideration. For me personally, the show never really lost me with its flashback sequences or its almost individual episode by episode stops. This is because all of these stops and flashbacks are executed masterfully. As far as the obstacles that Ellie and Joel face, they do much to further both characters' development. And it all ties beautifully together in the end. The flashbacks, while some are not very relevant in the immediate flow of the narrative, flesh out the world and can offer beautiful little narrative pockets of their own, which further emphasize the themes of love and survival that the show promotes, and more greatly highlight the tone of contrasting hope and hopelessness, of warmth and darkness that the story prioritizes. Joel and Ellie's sometimes slow, extended sequences of travel and exploration work in the same way. They give us a chance to get to know these characters more and get further attached to them in a way that develops their characters. The dialogue also serves to explain more of the world to us in a natural, unintrusive way that doesn't feel like forced exposition. On top of that, these sequences beautifully display the setting of the show. But yes, if you're more on the impatient side or prefer your dramas to be more non-stop, tension-filled affairs, the slowness of The Last of Us's pace and the massive time it dedicates to portions which are maybe not the most directly connected to the main narrative may turn you off or end up boring you. I do think there is a lot of beauty to be found in these slower sections if you can enjoy them for what they are in the moment. But it's also undeniable that if some of the time utilized for flashbacks and character backstories was instead used to develop Joel and Ellie's relationship further, it would have made the general flow a bit smoother and would have most likely made the season finale much more satisfying. The ending, as it stands, is good, if a bit abrupt, but it definitely could have benefited from a longer runtime or a bit more relationship development between our protagonists in the setup for it. However, even if you're someone who doesn't like interruptions in your story, you may at least find joy in the visual eye candy of the settings that the show explores in its many slower moments. Visuals are something I usually don't care about, but the way The Last of Us jumps from showing us expansive landscapes of greenery or of snow, pure and untouched by humanity, to the ravaged, destroyed remnants of cities with claustrophobic, purely urban environments, and then finally to those destroyed cities that merge both man-made architecture with the world's natural flora and fauna is absolutely breathtaking. I've never been so impressed with the show's production. The locations, the sets, the backgrounds, they're all so unbelievably beautiful. As far as production design, this show earns every last dollar of its budget. So, can you watch The Last of Us if you haven't played the games? Absolutely. At no point did I feel like I was missing out on any aspect of the show because of my unfamiliarity with the source material. But the more important question is, should you watch The Last of Us if you haven't played the games? Personally, I say yes, absolutely. If you're a fan of well-written dramas with realistic three-dimensional characters and deep human themes, and you're someone who doesn't have a problem with the pace slowing down every once in a while and the focus of the story occasionally deviating from your protagonists and their journey, the show does in fact stand alone. For me, dramas like these are definitely to my liking, and I'm really glad I finally gave The Last of Us a chance. 10 years later, I have finally repented for my sins, and I intend on playing the games as soon as I can. to my brother's enthusiasm and well-hidden smugness at having been right all these years. But anyways, yes, give The Last of Us a chance if it sounds like your cup of tea, or let me know what you thought about it in the comments if you saw it already. Thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to see more video essays and the occasional random review-ish type of thing like this, leave a like and maybe consider subscribing. Take care, and I hope to see you soon. Goodbye.